Yeah, so these are the various contents and modules which I'll be dealing with for the training. First is on the architecture and internals of SQL Server engine. So basically on how the architecture of SQL Server is in line and other stuff. Second one is on the installation, upgradation, configuration, managing services and migration. Basically, SQL Server comes as a product. It's a Microsoft product. So how do we install that? Suppose currently everybody uses the SQL 2012, which is the latest version. We do have 2014 also. It has just it's an evangelizing phase. So most of the corporates use 2012. So how do we upgrade that? So that is what I will be dealing with. What are the different steps involved in that? How do we configure? How do we manage the different config files and other stuff? Migrate. Migrate in the sense, if you have SQL 20 or 2008 and you wanted to migrate it to some different database server, you can do that. We have features with SQL Server where you can do that. That is the migration of database. Other part of migration is within SQL Server, like from one server to other server. If you want to migrate, that can be taken care easy. So what are the steps involved in that migration? So what are the different things we need to consider as part of the database backups, logins, security wise? So those things will be covered in this module. Module 3 is about the security, automation and monitoring. That means we have two types of security basically for SQL. One is the Windows authentication and other one is the SQL authentication. So we'll go in deep how and how do we configure as per of the business logic is concerned, which type of security we need to take in. So that talks about the security and automation, and auditing also comes here, so we can deal into more advanced as per the audience request. Okay. So next one is on the backup, restore, high availability and replication. So this is a huge topic which I have split across into the other modules like 5, and there are other modules where I can cover the high availability. Backup and restore is of a simple one only, like in case of any disaster, how do we restore the database to the point in time. So and high availability means how do we ensure that our database is available at a high level. There are different concepts involved in that, like log shipping, always on, mirroring, those things, clustering and other stuff. So this is a very advanced topic, but I will go to at a high level and we can go in depth as per the audience request. Second, next one is on the performance tuning, indexing and optimization of SQL Server. But this is also an advanced topic. So we can cover at the different indexes, cluster and non-cluster indexes, and then how do we optimize the SQL Server in case if the SQL Server is running slow. What are the different things, what are the checklists we need to check to ensure that our SQL Server is performing well? How do we fine tune that? Where are the things which are flaws with that SQL Server? So that is all about the main steps, and these are in depth which what are the different modules. These are the basic 6 modules, and I will be able to cover the details of what each module is in the respective PPTs. This is about the introduction of SQL Server, as I told at high level. We'll go through what is RDBMS, a big picture about what SQL Server is, what are the components and services of the SQL Server, roles of a DBA. So I have a checklist where we can ensure like these are the different roles a DBA should do. System databases. So we have the 4 system data, 5 system databases from 2008 onwards. So these are the so we'll go into depth like what each system database has to do, what does it contains. So we have 5 basic databases. One is master, module, MSDB, TempDB, and so resource is hidden, which is not shown, but I can go through like what exactly it does. It comes from SQL 2008 onwards. So that is all about the introduction, and second one is on the additions. So it depends upon your business which is supported by the corporate. the addition we need to use. So that talks about this. Going to the next slide. So this is a bit internals about the pages and extents. This is nothing but it's a minute concept. That means how the SQL server starts with what is the basic unit of the database. So that is the page. 8 pages contributes to an extent. So we'll talk in depth about what each page is and internal. So we can go into advanced also if anybody is interested. So this is about the page. Files and file groups. This is at a physical level how a database is stored. So what is the primary data files, what are the secondary data files, where are they stored, how do we store them, what are the stored procedures, system stored procedures we can use to see those file groups. So this is the other concepts of the internals of SQL Server architecture. Whenever any query is executed, or if you run any queries, internally what happens? What are the different configs we need to touch base? So in order to improve the query. So these are some of the different basic units. Okay. Coming to the memory architecture. So how a SQL Server, as I told, the basic unit is a page. So how a page is stored inside the memory, whether it's a RAM or it's a disk. So if it's a RAM, so how is it stored? If we have to boost the performance of memory, what are the different settings we need to deal with? So what are the dynamic queries which we can run to ensure that the memory is all good with SQL Server? So we'll go into the basics of the memory architecture as well as see how to check the configurations of SQL Server memory in order to get us a detailed information of the memory architecture. So going to the next one, the T-log architecture. This is a very important topic. So in order for us to do a point-in-time recovery, so this we need to touch base on the T-log architecture. So it talks about how a log is stored physically and logically. How do we recover that particular log? Let's say I have a database and I do a T-log transaction. That means I keep recording the transactions of that particular database physically on a disk. Suppose something happens to that database or if the server crashes, how do we restore the database? To what extent we can restore the database? So that is all dealt with this T-log. Where the T-log file is stored, how do we recover? What are the different options involved for us to do the recovery? Basically we do a restore with the recovery and we can do a point-in-time recovery. So this talks about the T-log architecture. Internally you can also see how the LSNs are stored across the page, various DBCC commands. So here we'll take a live example and then practically we can show how to restore that. So that will give you a clear picture of the T-log architecture. So this is on the module 2 details, installation, upgradation, configuration. So this is all pretty much on a practical basis. We need to have a system where we can practically show how do we install, how do we upgrade and configure some of the basic settings. So what are the different components involved in a SQL Server? It talks about that. So we have the analysis services, reporting services. What are the best practices of installation? So this is all about a purely installation. If you have to install any application, how do you do? Same way, there is a procedure involved for SQL Server installation as well. So this talks about that particular module. Yeah, so this is about the upgradation. So I said, right, upgradation, if you want to do an upgrade from 2008 to 2012, how do we do that? So basically it's a version change. So definitely you will see like compatibility issues. So how do we check the compatibility issues offhand before we upgrade so that we don't encounter any issues after we migrate? or after we upgrade. So there are certain steps which are involved. So we'll talk about all those things in this upgrade story. Managing services. So this is all about the managing how, if suppose you get any connectivity issues, you try to connect to a server but it's not connecting. So there are various errors involved with that. So these errors you will in order to know the errors, you need to have a practical exposure. So we can show you the different errors which we can encounter while connecting SQL Server. Similar way, firewall is one of the issue which will occur if there is any connectivity issue. Like that, if any services are stopped, you will see a particular error. If parameters are not set properly, you will see another set of errors. So there are different types of errors dealing with the connectivity issues. So how do we act on those? So we can talk about that in this particular section. Okay, so this is about the configuration. So this is basically the high level component configuration. I'll just go through only few in order to save time. So if you want to configure a database mail is basically you can have a mailing enabled from your SQL Server. That is, you can write a code in such a way that you can have the mail sent to your mail ID from SQL Server. Like I need to send mails to a list of employees on their birthdays. So for that you just need to maintain a table with employee names and their birthdays and write a code in such a way that it uses this database mail component to send the mails to respective employees on their birthday. So that kind of things we can practically check on using this configuration. So like that you have a different configuration settings and we can talk about in depth. Migration. So migration is nothing but you have a server and you have another server same version. You wanted to migrate the database from that server to another server. So upgradation is different from migration. Upgradation is like a version change. Migration is like you have the same version but you wanted to do it side by side. So how do you do that? You can, there are different methods involved in migration like attach and detach method, backup restore, copy database. You need to take care of the logins, I said security, link servers. So it depends upon how complex is your SQL Server. Based on that you can do the migration. So this is about the security automation and monitoring administration task. So this is like a high level administration task. How do we create jobs? How do we schedule them? How do we resolve the jobs? So some of the high level things we can discuss on this particular section. Monitoring SQL Server. So this is also an important where you can know how your SQL Server is behaving. So you have a different dashboards where you can see what is the CPU spike since a day for SQL Server. What are the different top procedures which are causing CPU spike, or the top queries, top time consuming queries, or the top queries which are using of memory. What are the top blockers? What are the speeds which are causing blocking? Those kind of dashboards can be seen, and we can have a practical session on this like that. So similar way, SQL errors. That is, if suppose something goes wrong, it gets logged into the SQL log. So you can scan your logs to see what is the errors. So it is always good practice to go through those logs. You have different procedures to do that. We have a file also where the logging is stored. So we'll also discuss some of the best practices on the monitoring. Going to next slide. So this talks about the security. So security, as I said, there are two main types. One is the Windows authentication and other one is SQL authentication. So dealing with those two, these are the different concepts which we can cover in the security. Let's take an example of schemas and credentials, or logins and mapping users to database. So there's a two different one is login and other one is user. So what is the difference between login and the user? So where do we use logins? Where do we use users? So those things we will discuss in this particular topic. And if you want to set some users to users for which permissions needs to be given to certain set of stored procedures, how do we do that? So that can be dealt with this particular topic of security. Yeah, so this is an important topic. Backup, restore, high availability in application. We can take in other module as well, this particular concept of high availability, based on, because this is a very time consuming topic, and we need to have a practical setup as well if you have to really see the clustering concept. And coming to, so I'll just switch off my email so that I'll just not disturbing. So what are the different types of backups we have? There's full backup, differential, D-log. So copy only came from 2005 onwards. These are the different things which have come from 2005 version. So we can cover the latest topics as well using this training. So you need to know in depth in this particular concept, because this plays a vital role for disaster recovery. If something goes wrong, how do you restore the database? So that talks about this. Here you can you need to learn about the T-SQL commands to take the backup. How do we take T-log backup? So those kind of, so that is the concept involved in this. And you have the recovery modes. So this is also an important part: simple, bulk log, and full. For simple, you will not be having point in time recovery. But as you go to bulk and full, you do have point in time recovery. But what is the difference between bulk and full? So those topics will cover here. And how a backup works internally. We can also go through the architecture inside how the backup is taken. Whether it takes the data backup or the log backup, how does it work? So this is internals of, again going in depth of those. This is restoring modes. So that is, restoring comes into picture if something goes wrong and you want to recover it. So there are different options involved. One is with recovery, no recovery, standby. So standby is used for log shipping. So this we can cover with this. Disaster recovery planning. So how robust your SQL server should be for high availability. So those kind of planning we can discover on this. If it is a high business impacting, you need to have a full backup along with a T-log backup every 5 minutes, and then have a log shipping to ensure the high availability. So those things we can discover. Creating the maintenance plans, how to deal with the backup failure, so any backup fails, what are the causes behind that, if any restoration fails, or what is the causes. So those things we can cover. So this is about the high availability features of log shipping. So we can practically set up the log shipping. Log shipping is basically having a redundant database kind of backup on a different server to ensure the point in time recovery. Point in time recovery is abstract, but if you how much schedule you do for a T-log, that much point in time recovery. It's basically called as RTO and R2, recovery time of shipping and recovery point of shipping. Based on that, you can set up your log shipping. So this is a very beautiful concept, and most of the organizations use this. This is an advanced level. If you know this concept in detail, practically you should be able to reach the advanced level of SQL Server. This is about the mirroring. This is another set of high availability feature of data. It came from 2.5 onwards. What is the difference between log shipping and mirroring? So there is a lot of difference. We will go into depth when we take the sessions. So I'll just give you a high level. So in the log shipping, the database is set to read only or standby, but in mirroring, it is in non-readable mode. It is in recovery state, so it cannot be used. But here you can leverage the feature of auto failover. You have a different modes. This is known as operation modes. You have three types of operation modes: high performing, high availability. So those kind of options. That one is synchronous and other one is asynchronous. So synchronous mirroring is where you can have the auto failover setup. So that if something goes wrong on the primary server, the database is immediately online on secondary, and users can connect to that. But in case of log shipping, you need to run a few scripts to ensure that the secondary is up. Okay. This also we can practically cover and ensure that everybody understands this. Replication. Replication is another beautiful concept of SQL Server. So here in our earlier cases of log shipping and mirroring, whole database is backed up on the secondary. But here it's a concept where you can identify few objects, few tables which needs to be replicated to the other server. So the secondary server. The secondary server is known as subscription. So you can have two types of subscription, push and pull. So push is nothing but where the primary pushes the transactions to secondary. The pull is where the secondary takes the transactions from primary. So that's basically the job is there at primary, or the job is there at secondary. It defines whether it is push or pull. So we can go in that depth. Merge is where it's like both primary and secondary can do the operations merge together, where you have the conflict resolutions and all. This is a high level thing. We can go if anybody has any practical dealing with the business or projects. This is the clustering. So this is a very good concept, and I have a lot of experience in that because we deal with day-to-day activities in the cluster in an hour. So I have worked with around 8 node cluster and both active and passive. So you have two types of customers: active and another one is active passive. So how do we deal with that? So you have the NLB clusters, network proprietor, we call it as HLB, high network, high availability load balancing. You do have the GSLB also. So we'll go to, I have not covered this, that is an advanced thing. You can go in depth also. How does that works? How the networking is done? How the quorum is defined? So clustering is the concept for the servers. If one server fails, how to ensure the other server is up? So that the users really don't know which server is down or which server is. They simply connect to a site, and that site internally connects to the active server where the transaction happens. If the active server is down, this clustering automatically enables the other server as the active server, so that the transactions are not out. So this is another concept of that. So we will go in depth on all these concepts. This is a very huge concept, so we can go in depth on it. So here also in clustering, how do we do the failover and all those things we can deal in depth. Let me scroll down. So installation, where you will have to deal with WFCSL, Windows Failover Custom Services. So how do we install that? And then I have the documentation also, I can share that. So, but we need to have the practical servers to help you understand how to do those things. So there it is a pretty difficult installation. It's not like installing any app or so, but this is something at a high level. Okay. So this is on administrating. So how do we install patches on clusters, hot fixes, how do we do the failover cluster management? That means if you want to manually failover a cluster to the secondary node, how do we do that? You have a cluster admin and you do using that. So those things we can. So how do we drop the cluster, uninstall? So basically all the steps which we do for a normal installation, but this is how do we do using cluster. So that is on, and this is always on. So this is another great concept which has come from so always on is both combination from the clustering and mirroring concept. So how do we have how do we ensure that the users are not hurt and they know which server they virtually don't know which server is down, but the connections are always live. At the same time, at the database level, how do we ensure that the database is always online? So how do we set up this? So it deals with availability groups, creation of availability groups, setting up the listener, and you have the three modes again here. So this can be done using two servers. So that will be go in depth. So this takes a day or so to understand on this. So each high availability concept what we have discovered from long shipping onwards, it's the advanced level concepts. Yeah, so high availability, interoperability and coexistence. That means what is the difference between the mirroring and long shipping? Can we have both in a server? So those kind of questions and those kind of settings, like mirroring and the data set snapshots, mirroring with failover. So I have worked in all these areas. So high availability failover question with always. So right now this is the most advanced setting which upgrade uses. This is a performance tuning, indexing and optimizing. This is all about the performance tuning. Like if your query is running, so how do you do the database tuning and all this stuff. So in depth we'll deal with all these things. I just wrote a highlight, but we'll go in depth. This starts with indexing. So CDC is another concept, change data capture. So it's like a replication only, but it's at table level. So what are the tables you can identify for the replication? So it is that. So this is another good concept. And the beauty of this is like you can know at database level what transactions have gone to the secondary. So what are the changes made at the column level, which columns got changed. So those things we can talk about. The table and index partitions are another big topic. So indexing. Indexing is a very critical and important topic again. So we have two in the types of index, clustered and non-clustered index, and the remaining other indexes are covering indexes, filtered index. These all are like coming from the basic two indexes. Suppose you want to make index on two columns, then you call it as a index two of the columns. So these are the base, and the other types of indexes come from these bases. And we have two other concepts called fragmentation. So what is fragmentation? So you have dealt with probably the index disk fragmentation. So that's where in your system might run through sometimes. Similarly, indexing is one of the very important concepts. If you deal with this properly, you can ensure that your queries are very optimal, and you can have your SQL Server configured in such a way and see that the fragmentation is reduced. Your queries will run very fast, and that is an efficient way of using your SQL Server. Okay, so this is again practically we can go in depth and taking a procedure, how do we do that. This is locking and concurrency. So if suppose two or more transactions are executing and they want to, they are using the same table. So that comes the locking. From locking you can see the blocking, deadlocks. Blocking is suppose if I try to use a resource or a table, at the same time other transaction also tries to use the particular resource. So then in this situation, first user is blocked, the second is how do we deal with this condition? How do we avoid blocking? You need to tune your procedures. Same way for deadlock also. Deadlock is a cyclic problem. So it is a very critical stage when deadlock happens. Sometimes SQL Server will also go down, causing a huge impact to business. Depends upon the data. So those things we can discuss on here. So these are all about the deadlocks. So what is live deadlock? What is general deadlock? How do we capture those details deadlock? So we can capture by using a trace type or multiple to this level. So those things. In error log you cannot get the picture of deadlock. So you need to have an advanced level of logging. So how do we put in that advanced level of logging? So we can then using the trace tools. So, and the last slide is about overall performance tuning. To view, how do we view at various levels, CPU, IO, memory, disk, whether your SQL Server is running properly or not. How do you do that? So that can be done, that can be made using time. So we'll go through some of the important dynamic queries for CPU, IO, memory and disk, as well as the network. And we'll go through the weight types. So weight types is another important concept where you can see which particular area there is a problem with the CPU. If the weight type is holded on schedulizer, then we can say it's because of CPU. If it's network IO, then we can say it's because of network. So those things we can clear and then come out. So this pretty much covers the administration part of SQL Server. Probably so these are some of the topics we go through. So each topic can take a day or so. Some of the topics are like module 1, 2, 3 are something which are like basic level, but from 4, 5 and 6 are like very critical topics which needs the practical exposure to the trainer who is taking the training, and we need servers for that. So we will go in depth on these things to help you understand in depth. Okay, so yeah, that's all from my end. So these are pretty much topics which we'll be covering. If you have, if you want to add anything, then we can do that. We can accommodate. Yeah. So Mayuri.
Tell me. Hello?
Yeah, Mayuri.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am done, Mayuri.
Okay. Is this over? Hello, Induteja?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. It's okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. And can you please send us the course content of SQL Server DBA?
I have shared using this recording, right?